No one's gonna believe you. You're just a black maid.
Fernando Alencar, a wealthy, powerful man, spoke slowly, his voice cold and dripping with contempt. That single sentence was enough to erase years of devotion, enough to crush every ounce of love Cláudia had given his children. With one word, he turned her from the woman who once saved his son's life into a despised thief. She was the kind of woman everyone overlooked in that mansion of over 2,000 square meters, a black housemaid, quiet, diligent, almost invisible. But for years, Cláudia had been the entire world of two twin boys, Pedro and Lucas, the sons of São Paulo millionaire Fernando Alencar. Both boys suffered from a rare disease, spinal muscular atrophy, a condition that slowly robs the body of its ability to move. The medicine keeping them alive, Spinraza, was one of the most expensive drugs in the world, each dose costing hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was stored in a locked, camera-monitored room with an electronic code. Yet for Cláudia, the most precious thing wasn't the medicine. It was the faint smile the boys gave her every morning when she entered their room. She fed them, read to them, massaged their stiff arms, and stayed up through the night just to make sure they were still breathing. Pedro once whispered, "Miss Cláudia, I wish my mom were like you." Those words made her heart tremble, because in that house, it was one of the few times she was seen as a human being. One morning, the bell from the office rang. Cláudia wiped her hands, thinking her employer wanted to discuss the medicine schedule. But when she entered, Fernando was sitting still, his eyes cold as stone. On the desk lay an opened vial of Spinraza. "Cláudia," he said softly, his tone heavy as iron, "you've done something unforgivable. You stole my son's medicine." She froze. Her mind shattered into fragments. "No, sir, I never—" But he didn't listen. Not for a second. "You're the only one with a spare key. You know exactly how much that drug is worth. Do you take me for a fool?" Cláudia felt her throat tighten. The room seemed to close in around her, her breath coming in sharp gasps. She tried to speak, to explain, but her voice dissolved into the air. She begged him to believe her, that there must be some mistake, that she'd never touched the vial. Fernando stood up, looking down at her. "No one will believe you. I am Fernando Alencar, and you're just the help." That sentence cut deeper than any blade. No blood, but a wound that would never heal. That night, Cláudia didn't sleep. She remembered every laugh, every coughing fit of the twins. She remembered the night Lucas nearly stopped breathing in her arms. How she'd performed chest compressions for 10 minutes until he gasped back to life. She remembered Pedro's weak voice whispering, "Don't cry, Miss Cláudia. I'm still here." And now, because of one accusation, all those memories had become evidence against her. The morning of the trial, it rained. Cláudia sat alone on a cold wooden bench, her old uniform soaked through. No lawyer, no one to hold her hand, only a fragile belief that truth might still save her. The courtroom doors opened. Fernando entered, flawless black suit, 2 lawyers in tow, camera flashes bursting. He smiled as though victory was already his. No one looked at Cláudia. No one asked her a thing. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. The sound of the gavel echoed, dry and final. Cláudia lowered her head, hands clasped tightly. Her heart raced, but her eyes stayed fixed on the door, as if waiting for a miracle. And then, the heavy doors at the back swung open. 2 fragile, pale boys were wheeled in. The entire courtroom turned. Fernando froze. Pedro looked straight at Cláudia, eyes glistening with tears. His voice trembled, but his words were clear. "She didn't do anything wrong. Miss Cláudia saved us. She's not a thief." That sound shattered the suffocating silence. And in that moment, for the first time, everyone truly saw Cláudia, not as a maid, but as the second mother who had saved those boys with nothing but love. Sometimes, justice isn't written by power, but by the honest tears of gratitude. And some people, even without status, without wealth, can make the whole world bow down through nothing but genuine love. She was a woman standing alone against an empire of power. Cláudia sat at the defendant's table, facing Fernando Alencar, a man whose single word could rewrite headlines, whose glance could seal another person's fate. The courtroom was suffocatingly silent, yet the verdict seemed already decided before the hearing even began. Fernando's lawyer rose, his voice booming, confident like an actor in command of the stage. "She betrayed their trust," he declared, pointing toward Cláudia. "She knew exactly where the medicine was, what it was worth, and she planned carefully to steal it." He spoke about the price of the medicine as if it were gold, each dose worth more than an entire lifetime of ordinary labor. Then he looked around the courtroom and said sharply, "To her, those poor children were nothing more than a way to make money." The room erupted into murmurs. Cláudia wanted to scream that it was a lie, but her throat burned dry, strangled by fear. All she could hear was the pounding of her own heart, blending with the frantic clacking of reporters' keyboards, writing her life into a sensational headline. The prosecutor went on, each word like a knife. "This isn't just theft. It's a crime that could have killed 2 innocent children." Images of medicine boxes flashed on the big screen. "They disappeared on the very day Miss Cláudia was on duty alone," he said, his voice triumphant. Every gaze turned toward her. People nodded, as if they had found their culprit. No one asked why a poor, devoted woman would do such a thing. No one needed an answer. Prejudice had already provided one. Cláudia had no lawyer of her own. The court-appointed one never showed up. When she pleaded for a postponement, the judge simply said, "This court doesn't have time for delays." She clasped her hands tightly on her knees, forcing down her tears. Each accusation struck her chest like a hammer. She had once believed that truth was bright enough to shine on its own, but that day she understood. Light never reaches places where people refuse to look. When asked to testify, Cláudia stood up. Her voice trembled as she said only a few words. "I didn't take anything. I love those boys like my own." But the judge interrupted her. "We are not here for emotions. We are here for facts." The courtroom fell silent. Facts. She let out a faint laugh, soaked in tears, because she knew that in this place, truth had no value compared to status. When Fernando took the stand, he spoke in a slow, heavy voice, full of wounded dignity. "I trusted her. I treated her like family, and she betrayed that trust." People nodded again. That sentence sealed her fate like an official stamp. Stacks of documents were brought out, papers, photos, surveillance footage. In one clip, Cláudia appeared entering the medicine room. No sound, no context, just an image. They played it, and everyone watched as though seeing undeniable proof. No one knew she had gone in only to check the dosage, as she did every day. A former housemaid stood up and said, "She was always too attached to the boys." The tone dripped with malice, as if a poor woman's affection were something suspicious. Another added, "I once heard her say that medicine was worth more than her whole house." No one mentioned that Cláudia had said those words in shock, not out of greed. She was forced to sit still, watching as they stripped her dignity away, word by word, accusation by accusation. Even the judge sighed, as if she were nothing more than an inconvenience to be dealt with quickly. When the next hearing resumed, Cláudia was exhausted. She thought she had heard the worst already. But then Fernando's lawyer presented newly discovered messages, chat logs between her and a supposed black market buyer. In them, she discussed prices, delivery times, even dosage quantities. The courtroom exploded with whispers. Cláudia went numb. She had never sent those messages, but they carried her name, her phone number, her handwriting. The forgery was flawless. "Your Honor," the lawyer said, "this is irrefutable evidence. She planned this from the start." Every eye turned toward her. She opened her mouth, but the judge cut her off. Order in the court. You'll speak when it's your turn. She took a deep breath, trying not to cry. Then she saw it, that small smile curling on Fernando's lips. Cold, arrogant, triumphant. The smile of a man who believed justice could be bought, and that a poor black woman, alone and powerless, would never win. The room grew colder. Cláudia thought of the twins. Would they believe her? Would anyone tell them that the woman who stayed up all night by their bedside was now being tried like a criminal? The thought twisted her heart in pain. She bowed her head, gripping the wooden table, pressing her lips tight to keep from sobbing. No one in that courtroom knew, and perhaps no one cared, that she had never stolen anything at all. She had only been robbed of trust, of dignity, of her life. The judge furrowed his brows, his face hardening. With every word from the prosecution, he nodded, as if each accusation carried unquestionable weight. The air grew thick and heavy, choking the breath out of the room. Cláudia sat there, the same fear from the first day returning, that everything she knew, everyone she loved, was being torn away. Every pair of eyes around her looked the same, the gaze of people convinced she was guilty. A poor black woman, standing against the rich and the powerful. No one needed further proof. She glanced toward Fernando. He was adjusting his tie, calm, composed, and, for the first time, satisfied. The forged evidence had done its job. Light reflected off his face, the gleam of a man who believed he had won. In her mind, one question spun endlessly. Why? Why would he do this to me? It couldn't just be revenge. There had to be something deeper. Perhaps a secret he needed to hide, or simply the cruel desire to prove that someone like her could never stand against someone like him. She had no answer, only the rising weight of despair inside her chest. Tears rolled down her face as she forced herself to breathe slowly. She told herself, I must stand tall. Even if they put chains on my wrists, I must speak the truth. Justice may not see me, but I will not let it die in silence. And then, something unimaginable happened. Just as the judge prepared to deliver his final remarks, the back door of the courtroom creaked open, the sound echoing through the stillness. Every head turned. A brief moment of confusion, and then a wave of murmurs swept the room. The twin boys entered the courtroom. Pedro, frail and thin, leaned on a walker, every step a battle against gravity. Lucas, beside him in a motorized wheelchair, guided the joystick with trembling hands. Both wore crisp white shirts, their faces soft with youth. Yet their eyes held an astonishing steadiness. The room went completely silent. No more clicking keyboards, no more camera flashes. Even the judge stopped writing. No one had expected these two children to leave the hospital, let alone come to court. Their eyes searched for Cláudia. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Her knees weakened. Her heart felt crushed in her chest. Seeing them there, fragile, brave, present in the very room where she stood accused, made every emotion inside her break loose. Pedro dragged his walker forward. Lucas rolled alongside him, never letting his brother out of reach. Every step, every push of the wheels was a small war against their bodies. Yet they kept moving, steady, as if the whole world was watching, and they couldn't afford to fall. Cláudia burst into tears. She stood, trembling, arms reaching out to them. Pedro let go of his walker, collapsing gently into her arms, clutching her waist as tears soaked her blouse. Lucas reached out too, his small hand shaking as it touched hers. No one spoke. No one needed to. The truth had just entered the room, in the form of two fragile children stronger than anyone there. Pedro looked up, red-eyed, and faced the judge. His voice was weak, broken, but every word rang clear. She didn't do anything wrong. Miss Cláudia is our mother. She takes care of us every day. Lucas followed, his voice trembling but firm. We saw someone else touch the medicine box when Dad wasn't home. We didn't know what to do, but Miss Cláudia, she didn't take anything. The room held its breath. The judge leaned forward, his pen slipping from his hand. Some people covered their mouths. Others bowed their heads as tears fell silently. Those sick, fragile children had done what none of the powerful adults in that room could. They spoke a truth that couldn't be bought. Fernando shot to his feet, his face flushed red, shouting in panic. "Nonsense! They don't understand! They're confused! They're sick!" But his voice cracked mid-sentence. The judge slammed the gavel. "Silence! Let the children finish!" Fernando tried to protest, but the judge's voice cut through. "Sit down." And for the first time, he obeyed. Pedro wiped his tears and continued. "She gives us our medicine on time," he said. Lucas added softly, "She sleeps beside us when we're scared. She knows when we're in pain." No argument could be stronger than that. Those simple sentences pierced through every lie. The courtroom, once crowded with prejudice, was now filled only with silence and shame. People lowered their heads. Some reporters put their cameras down. No one dared meet Cláudia's eyes now shining with a light of truth they had long ignored. The twins had just proven what the entire justice system could not, that real love needs no lawyer, no wealth, only faith. And in that moment, Cláudia, the woman once dismissed as just the maid, was seen for the first time as the true mother of the children she had saved, not only with medicine, but with love. She held the boys tightly, kissing their thin hair. Her tears still fell, but they were no longer tears of fear. They were tears of hope. She looked around the courtroom and saw a miracle. Eyes that had changed. No more contempt, no more prejudice. Some bowed their heads, others wiped their eyes. Even the judge no longer looked cold. He seemed to be truly thinking. Fernando sat frozen, his confident mask beginning to crack. He had no more words. No forged evidence could outweigh the truth spoken by two weak but brave children. No recordings, no expensive lawyers, only love and faith. Cláudia took a deep breath, holding it for a few seconds. She still didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time in many days, she wasn't alone. Even if fate led her out of that room in chains, she knew she hadn't fought in vain. The judge leaned forward, gently setting down his pen. His voice was calm, steady. "Children, could you tell us more? Exactly what you saw?" Both nodded. Pedro began first, his voice small but firm. "I remember that night. There was someone in the house. I heard a strange voice, and I saw someone take the medicine box from the cold room." He hesitated, eyes welling with tears. "I told Dad, but he said we were mistaken. We got scared, so we didn't say anything else." The courtroom fell into absolute silence. Everyone listened. Cláudia held her breath, eyes locked on the children she had carried through fevers, through nights of pain. The judge took notes slowly. No one objected. No one interrupted. The only sound left was the scratching of his pen on paper. Then Lucas lifted his head and said, "That night, I couldn't sleep. I saw Miss Isabella, the one who works with Dad, coming out of the medicine room. She was holding something. I'd never seen her there before." A wave of murmurs spread through the courtroom. Isabella Mendez, Fernando's lawyer, froze in her seat. Her face went pale, though she tried to hold a mask of calm. The judge stopped writing and stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded to a clerk. "Record this in the minutes. Summon witness Isabella Mendez for questioning." The atmosphere shifted entirely. People began to look at Cláudia differently, not as the accused, but as someone wronged. She squeezed the twins' hands and whispered, "Thank you." The boys smiled, their eyes glowing. With a light no money could buy. After a brief recess, the judge returned to the bench. His voice was firm, yet warm. "The court will officially record the testimony of the two children." Court staff helped them to the front. Pedro trembled, trying to stand on his walker. Lucas was wheeled beside the witness stand. Neither of them shook nor lowered their heads. Pedro began slowly, every word deliberate. Miss Cláudia never missed a single dose of our medicine. She stayed with us. When we were in pain, when we cried. Lucas continued. She slept on the chair in our room. She woke up at night to make sure we were still breathing. Those words tore through every lie left standing. No one in that courtroom, not even those who once believed Fernando, could deny the love carried in those trembling voices. Cláudia took a deep breath and asked permission to speak. She opened her small bag and pulled out old notebooks, pages thickened by time and tears. Inside were medical notes, dosage schedules, symptom logs, emails to doctors, emergency call times, and records of the nights she had stayed awake, ensuring those two boys survived every crisis. Each trembling line, each dated entry in those notebooks was a witness to her devotion, living proof that she had never betrayed them. The judge examined every page, nodding slowly. The prosecution said nothing. The only sound in the room was the turning of paper, the sound of faith slowly returning. Then Fernando suddenly stood, ignoring his lawyer. Lies, all of it. She's manipulating the children. She brainwashed them to pity her. His voice boomed, cracking with rage. Can't you see? This is emotional theater, cheap sentiment. But no one believed him anymore. The eyes that once looked at him with respect now held only suspicion and disgust. The judge let him finish, then calmly said, Thank you, Mr. Alencar. Please, take your seat. No one stood by him. As he looked around, those who had once been his allies now lowered their heads, avoiding his gaze. Even Isabella, the lawyer who once sat beside him with confidence, was pale, silent, unable to lift her eyes. The judge ordered, Suspend attorney Isabella Mendez from duty pending investigation. Gasps filled the courtroom. A wave of true justice had just swept through. Now everything had turned. Those who had been certain of Cláudia's guilt were now scribbling furiously, whispering among themselves. Members of the jury, once indifferent, now looked up with sharp attention. Fernando sat tense, jaw clenched, his fingers tapping unconsciously on the desk, as if trying to hold on to power that was slipping away piece by piece. Cláudia lifted her head and looked around. For the first time since it all began, the defendant's bench didn't feel like a prison. It felt like a place where truth could finally stand. And when the two boys smiled at her, she understood. Justice may come slowly, but when it comes, it wears the face of love. The judge turned toward the twins now sitting quietly beside Cláudia. His expression softened, though his tone remained firm. Can you repeat, he asked gently, exactly what you saw? The boys spoke again, every detail matching, without hesitation, without fear. Each word echoed through the once cold courtroom, soft but steady, like the heartbeat of truth. Reporters wrote frantically. Everyone understood that something monumental was happening, something they could no longer pretend not to see. At the end of the session, the judge announced, This court will open an independent investigation into Mr. Fernando, Alencar's legal team. His voice was calm, yet the room trembled. He turned to the twins. You've done something very brave. The court thanks you for your honesty and your strength. Cláudia bowed her head as tears streamed down her cheeks. But this time, they weren't tears of fear. The heaviness in her chest lifted. She didn't yet know what would happen next. But for the first time since the nightmare began, she no longer felt like the accused. She felt heard. Fernando rose slowly. He was no longer the commanding, confident man who once ruled the room. His steps were heavy, his eyes hollow. No one spoke as he left his seat, because everyone knew. His power had vanished with the truth. Cláudia remained seated, holding the boys' hands. No applause, no cheers, only silence. a silence full of reverence, the kind that appears only when people witness something real. The same courtroom that had once waited eagerly to see her condemned was now utterly still, because it realized it had been wrong. And in that moment, the truth didn't need to shout. It only needed to be heard. Then, attorney Isabella Mendez was called to the stand. She sat upright, maintaining composure, but her eyes had lost their cold confidence. The judge asked, "Can you explain why you were in the medicine storage area that night?" "That was a mistake," she replied quickly, her voice shaking. "I thought it was the office." The judge frowned, repeating slowly, more firmly, "Are you certain?" Isabella swallowed hard. "I heard a noise. I went to check," she said. A moment later, she changed her story again. "Actually, I was looking for something Mr. Fernando left behind." Whispers rippled through the courtroom. Her contradictory words tangled like ropes tightening around her own neck. The judge took detailed notes, his gaze sharp. Cláudia watched, heart pounding. The woman who had destroyed her honor was now destroying herself. A new witness was called, a staff member from the hospital where the medicine was distributed. His voice was calm but firm. "Yes, I saw her several times, and I heard her, talking to two men about transferring extra doses to another buyer. She spoke as if she had done this before." The courtroom gasped. Some people's mouths dropped open. Others stood up in disbelief. Cláudia froze, her hands trembling as each word hit her. She turned toward Isabella, the woman who had once pointed at her in front of cameras. Now sat with her head bowed, face pale, unable to speak. The judge ordered, "Bring the legal team's records immediately." Within minutes, a clerk returned with a thick stack of files. The judge opened it, flipping through page after page until he stopped at a few faded lines. When he finished reading, he looked up, his voice echoing through the courtroom. "Several documents have been altered. Delivery dates do not match hospital records. There are forged signatures. 3 rare doses were withdrawn without authorization." His words struck like hammer on steel, shattering everything. No one spoke. The truth had finally found its voice. Tears streamed down Cláudia's face, tears of release. No longer humiliated, she stood and embraced the 2 boys, whispering, "We did it. No defense needed, no victory required. Only truth, finally seen." Those who once doubted her now bowed their heads. Some avoided her eyes. Others whispered softly, "Disculpa." And Fernando, silent. He sat there with his face buried in his hands, eyes empty, like a man waking from a terrible dream. The judge asked, "Do you have anything to say, Señor Alencar?" Fernando didn't answer. He sat motionless, mumbling into his trembling palms. The man who once believed he controlled the world, now powerless before the truth. The room remained still. No rustling, no whispers. Everyone understood. This was no longer just the story of a maid falsely accused. It was an indictment of a system where power too easily strangles justice. The woman once called a traitor now sat between the 2 children, their hands intertwined. 3 souls, one dismissed as worthless, 2 deemed too weak, had accomplished what money never could. They brought the truth back to life. Justice doesn't always stand with the powerful. Sometimes it awakens through the softest voices, the purest hearts unafraid to speak. Fernando had everything: wealth, power, prestige. But Cláudia, the woman they all looked down on, had what he could never buy: faith and genuine love. While he used power to bury lies, she used quiet strength to protect 2 fragile lives as if they were her own. And in the end, the world bowed before the woman it once refused to see. Cláudia's story reminds us that compassion is sometimes the highest form of justice. No loud speeches, no titles, just a heart pure enough not to stay silent in the face of wrong. If you were Cláudia, accused of something you didn't do, would you stay silent or stand up and speak the truth? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories of courage, emotion, and justice, like this one.